Good morning, church. Good to see you this morning, and I hope you are doing especially well today. Weather took a weird turn. Got kind of chilly yesterday, but it'll bounce back. That's the way these things go. It is a good day. I know we've got some visitors here, and I'm thankful that you are here. I suspect we have some that are online. I'm glad that you are here as well and able to meet and worship with us in whatever capacity you have. And I do hope that you can at some point come and visit with us in person. We would love to get to meet you. I do recognize some of you are in other countries and that may be a little difficult, but should you find yourself in Evansville, please do stop in. We'd love to see you. We do have two people that are with us today in their early visit. Our summer interns, Evie and Nathan, have come in for a visit this weekend. Some of you have already met them, but guys, if you all will stand, then be sure to meet Evie and Nathan after church. They'll be in the back, and we're glad you guys are here. They'll be here May 19th, and then the following week, Evie will be here, and it'll be a great summer. Thank you guys, and really anticipate supporting them and the work they're going to do with us as well, and diving in and having a fantastic summer. Glad Drew Weddle could be with us as well this morning. I asked him how he's doing and if I should or should not make mention. He's like, I don't know. I said, then that's an invitation to do so. He's not responded at all at this. Clever move, Drew. But anyway, be sure to check on Drew as he's injured his foot, and we're glad he could be with us as well. We do have a lot of good things that are happening in our congregation. From donations that will be given for a great giveaway that we're going to have in a couple of months. People are so generous in that regard, and I thank you for that. We do have a lot of plans coming up for Vacation Bible School. A lot of great things going with that, and I appreciate all the effort and the service that people are doing in the midst of that. It's a big deal. It's a big deal to be able to use your abilities and talents to serve the congregation. We also have a Ladies' Day that's coming up in just a couple of weeks, and a lot of work has been put into that, and we really appreciate the effort that's going on in that regard. The point is, if you look in our bulletin and you look at our website and you talk to our people, there are a myriad of ways that you can become involved in our congregation and be blessed, not just from the way that you serve, but the way that the services are taking place. And we hope that you do that in a way that helps you draw closer to the Lord. These are good places to get involved. And if you say, well, I don't know how to do that yet, please come talk to one of us and we will put you in the right path to dial in and be involved in some really, really good things. Today we're going to continue our series where we're talking about Jesus first. If it's your first time here or if you need a slight reminder, our theme this year is Jesus first. What does it mean to have Jesus first in your life? That it's through Jesus you have your thoughts developed and formed. It's through Jesus you have the formation of your actions, the formation of where you belong, who you are meant to be, your identity. What does it mean today to have purpose in Jesus first? And how do you couple that with the passions that you have, with the abilities that God has given you? Every single one of us has a certain degree of abilities. And this is where it gets really interesting. And lessons like this I love because it becomes very individual. There's a certain thing that you can do that I know I'm not going to be able to do. There are certain capabilities that all of us share, but there are things that are very unique to you. And you may be sitting there going, does that have a place in the Lord's church? The answer is probably. Probably. Most likely. If it is a godly action and you've got the right heart, which is based in God and God's story, and if you've got the right intent and you've got the right purpose to glorify God in it, then yeah, there's a place. Sometimes we have to get a little more creative with it, but it's there. It's there for you to use your passions to fit the purposes of God. And we're going to examine what that may look like today. You ever met someone who has a very powerful and unique talent? I mean, the kind where you just look at it and you're like, how in the world do you do that? It may be that it's an artistic talent. It may be that it's a musical talent. It could be a whole myriad of things, but it doesn't matter if I can do it or not. Even a person who is like the one in the image now where they are weaving a rug by hand is an incredible thing to see. You ever seen one in person where someone has made by hand a rug? I went with my sister one time into a rug store in Lexington Green, which is obviously in Lexington, Kentucky, because she wanted to show me a rug. And it wasn't very big, but it took 6 women years to do each individual thread in silk to make this rug. It was incredible. Whether it was aesthetically pleasing to me or not was irrelevant. It was the fact that these people had such a talent and given it over to such a degree that they had made this beautiful object. This was a thing where a human being had invested themselves in the midst of it. It was magnificent. Did I touch it? Yes, of course. Did I put my foot on it? Yes. It was $120,000, so I left quickly after putting my foot on it. It's a wild rug. But it's an intersection between your capabilities and the needs of someone where we find meaningfulness in our passion and our purposes with God. Now think about that. Your capabilities, whatever they may be, and where they intersect with the needs in your community, in your social group, and your friend group, this is where we begin to find the meaningfulness and purposefulness in our service to God. But it's just the beginning. In fact, in some ways it's just mechanical, but it's necessary to start there. Capability and needs. We need a biblical example of that, and we certainly have many, but we're going to go to Acts chapter 9 to kind of look into this for a little bit. The intersection of capability and needs is a concept we can find in Acts chapter 9, verses 36 through 43. Turn there with me and let's read that for a little bit. It's a fascinating story for a multitude of reasons. We're going to read it first, and then we're going to break it down, and then we're going to dive into it for a little bit. So this is Peter is kind of the dominant figure in terms of the apostles that are moving at this point in Acts. And we're kind of in between some things. In chapter 8, Philip had gone to the Samaritans, so the gospel is spreading and the church is growing. In fact, in certain places it's blossoming and flourishing, and these are magnificent times. Acts chapter 10, next chapter, we're going to have Cornelius, the first Gentile, to be converted. And so there's these transitional moments that are taking place, and they're huge in their scope. And that causes us to typically talk about those things. But at the same time that those moments are happening, there's these sort of stories where you find church people leaning on one another and supporting one another and loving one another. This is a story where we're not really dealing with a complicated, sinful or works of the flesh kind of issue and navigating troubles in the church in that regard. This is the church having a need because of what their own people are going through. And this is church people being there for one another, and to an amazing extent. They're showing immense capability to meet a need that's very real. And in that, we have a very meaningful story showing people living out the passion that they have for the purposes of God, which is an example we want to follow. So here we go. At Joppa, there was a certain disciple named Tabitha, which is translated Dorcas. This woman was full of good works and charitable deeds, which she did. But it happened in those days that she became sick and died. And when they had washed her, they laid her in an upper room. And since Lydda was near Joppa, and the disciples had heard that Peter was there, they sent 2 men to him, imploring him not to delay in coming to them. Verse 39, then Peter arose and he went with them. And when he had come, they brought him to that upper room. And all the widows stood by him, weeping and showing the tunics and the garments which Dorcas had made while she was with them. But Peter put them all out, and he knelt down and prayed. And turning to the body, he said, Tabitha, arise. And she opened her eyes. And when she saw Peter, she sat up. Then he gave her his hand and lifted her up. And when he had called the saints and the widows, he presented her alive. And it became known throughout all Joppa, and many believed on the Lord. And so it was that he stayed many days in Joppa with Simon the tanner. Which is, of course, going to set up chapter 10. But here we have a moment. I love it because it's kind of a personal moment, isn't it? This is the needs within church, and it's very, very specific. There's a lady that they deeply cared about, and they were deeply mourning her passing. And to be sure, there are so many other people that are sick in the world at this time. And to be sure, Peter would be a very, very busy person as he's going out and spreading the gospel. But this person had exceptional meaning, it seems, to her. Why? Because she was a person who had taken her passions and capabilities and met the needs of that community in such a profound way that this wasn't just regular grief, which we would understand, and losing someone so dear to you, but this is someone who had an immense impact on their lives. And it wasn't just some sort of a need that had to be, well, that's just kind of a nice luxury. she's really taking care of a deep thing that they must have. It is a basic foundational need for us to be fed, to be clothed, to take care of our thirst, to have a social interaction with people. These are fundamental needs. Whatever capability she had, she's doing that for people. And they are deeply, deeply moved. It's an internal church matter. And it's very beautiful. But it asks some questions that come out of this in the midst of the story. One, let's touch back for just a second and try to understand the context in the bigger picture of God's story. We know the church is part of God's plans, and now we're seeing this one beautiful moment in the midst of it. So we're going to take a little bit of what we used last week in terms of connecting the dots to understand the narrative a little bit better. And we say, are there other parts in the scripture where we can look at this and we can really pull out some details that make this a richer story? We can understand it in God's story for that. And yeah, there absolutely is. Even as you stop and think about it, okay, what might those be? And now this is the portion we're kind of learning a little bit about Bible study in general and how to dive into this a little bit. But it's useful. It's useful. What are the connecting elements of this narrative of God's works to other ones in the Bible? Well, Peter bringing someone back from the dead is an easy one. But more specifically, the upper room element of it. That may draw us back to the story of Elijah, the prophet. 1 Kings 17, verse 19. If you remember, he was with the lady Zarephath, and he brings someone back from the dead, son, but it happens in an upper room. That's an interesting element. Elisha in 2 Kings chapter 4, we know that the Shunammite woman and her family provided Elisha with a place to lodge in an upper room. And when her son died, they took him to that room, and that's where Elisha came and brought the boy back from the dead. But also in the works of Jesus, which might be one that comes very quick to mind, when he healed Jairus' daughter. In Mark chapter 5 and verse 41, Jesus comes in and he's been asked by Jairus to deal with his daughter because she was just sick. But in the means of getting there, she had passed away. But Jesus was like, I can still take care of this situation for God's glory. And if you remember, similarly, he cleared the space, asked people to leave, just like Peter did. And interestingly enough, Jesus said, Talitha Kumai, little girl, arise. And in this situation, Peter says, Tabitha, arise. It's only one letter difference. And I know a lot can change between one word and another because of one letter, but it's an interesting and easy way to remember the two things and see a correlation that there's a bigger story going on here. It's not good for us just to isolate stories in and of themselves, but if they have a legitimate connection between other events in the Bible, let's get the richness of that in there. And we can see there's an ongoing history of God working through his people for his purpose so that he could be glorified, and the results are that people would be blessed in a multitude of ways. You're like, yeah, obviously, your loved one's brought back from the dead. That's amazing. But that's not the end of the blessing. Think about from Elijah to Elisha to Jairus' daughter, the reaction of the people who were very aware of those situations. In that was the realization that God is alive and that God has power even over death, and that our God cares about individuals and that our God is active. And because of those facts that came out of these stories and this one, it led other people to believe. And in believing, they would have salvation. And the church was going to grow and flourish and nourish one another in this. It's a healthy way to go back and connect these narratives in meaningful ways. It's useful in that regard. But back to the specifics of this particular lesson in this story, historical event in Acts chapter 9, we've got the question of, well, who are the examples in this story of living in God's purpose? It's two pretty obvious ones. We'd all say, well, obviously Dorcas, man, that's the whole point. You got a painting of them up there. And Peter, main point as well, of course, but not the only ones. Sure, Peter is the apostle, and he's going through the lands, and he's preaching and teaching. And I love the fact that in all the things that he could be doing, in the great scope of the church, he takes the time to respond to this one instance. He's in a city far away when they go to him, 10 miles. That's half a day's journey. Stop and think of all the excuses he could have made for why not to do that. I'm sure there's other people that had passed away. I'm sure there was other people that were sick. I'm sure there's other people that had needs. but he gave them the time. He had time to give. He had love to give. He had concern to give. These are godly qualities that fit a godly purpose, and he gave those as well. What a blessing to be able to do that. Dorcas, as we've already looked at, she was a person who had great skill and capability, and she made the time, took the joy, and gave to her community to fit a need that they had. If these ladies were widows, they may not have access to tunics and garments quite easily. It's very reasonable to think they could have been incredibly poor. They might not have been able to provide for themselves, and yet she gives them godly love to give them a need. It's magnificent. Those two are clear. But what about the messengers? Isn't it amazing that these men, they didn't know if Peter would respond, and yet they still went. They did not know if Peter would perform such a miracle, even though where he was nearby, he had just done an amazing healing. So it gave them maybe he'll come and do something with us. But on that hope and in that faith and knowing that such an ask was in the context of God's larger story, they went and made that half-day journey to see Peter and to ask him to come be with them. To just make the effort makes all the difference in the world. And then they made the rest of the day's journey back in the hopes that something would take place. They had a passion for the church family. And with whatever capabilities they had in giving their time and their ability to walk and to go and talk to Peter at the time and just make the ask, they were willing to do it. That's significant. Would have been pretty easy for them just to sit around and say, man, wouldn't it be great if Peter came here? Wouldn't it be great if someone went and talked to him? Man, I hope somebody does that. And just wait for someone to do it. These were the kind of people that said, it needs to be done, we'll do it. Somehow they had the time and the capability, and they took it upon themselves to take action. That's passion. That's capability, and that's a need, and they engaged in it. But even the women that were there that had the tunics and the garments that were in grief, we understand at funerals, there's moments of grief, we get it. But they were serving in an immense way, given their capability to show respect and care for what they'd been given. To honor Dorcas for the works that she had been doing is an amazing thing to be able to do. They presented to Peter and the others the things that she had done that honored them and gave them life and hope. This is not without significance. The reason of looking through all four examples is it shows there's a different way for everybody. Each person's capability and each person's participation was very significant in the fullness of the story. We shortchange it if we only look at Peter and Dorcas. Every person in the church had a place to participate. And that's no different today. Absolutely no different today. Every single person has a place to participate. With your capability, looking for the needs that you see in our community and the community that we live in. It's important to remember. But in Christianity, we got to up the game a little bit. If we only talk about capability and need, again, it's a little mechanical. I can do a thing. These people have a need. Let's connect those two things. It's a bit robotic. And in some ways, it doesn't pull up to the thing that God calls us to do as a church family, to be connected to one another out of love. Well, when we're talking zeal, when we're talking about using my capabilities to the point that I have a passion for it and I'm emotionally invested in it, we've gone up a level. We've committed ourselves in the way that Jesus did to us. And now we're in the realm of not just a person doing a service, but really, really deeply caring and investing ourselves with our capabilities into the needs. And not just needs, opportunities. And I don't mean that word. And you ever had someone come up to you and go, hey man, I got an opportunity for you. You know where that's going to go, right? You know where that's going to go. What if we take and reclaim that word a little bit? Instead of it's just need, we go to opportunity in the sense that you can create opportunities. I don't mean opportunities where you sit and wait for a thing to happen. You see it, and then where there's a possibility to meet someone and their needs, and they're inviting you into that, you take advantage of that. And you dive in. You're not waiting for life to happen. You help make it happen. You help make it happen. This is a different level than just capability and need. We're Christians. We've got to be in that zeal and opportunity mindset. Absolutely in that mindset. And that's a thing that we sometimes struggle with in the church. We know there's so many things going on. Sometimes we say, hey, how can I contribute? I know there's people that are doing a fantastic work. There absolutely is. How can I contribute and participate? Now that doesn't mean everyone's going to be able to do every single thing that's going on. May not be for you. But you may surprise yourself. And it's worth trying. And it's worth offering. And it's worth exploring. How can I bring my capabilities to the level of zeal? And how can I see need and turn that to an opportunity to make a difference for God's story, for God's purposes, for God's glory? That's what every single one of those people were doing in this account. That's the significance of this seems like a small story, but it's so big in what's taking place in the reality of the lives of the Christians. That's why I love the scripture reading that Grant gave us a little bit earlier. Listen to this. And as we read this again, I want you to think of it in terms of the contrast between just capability and need and zeal and opportunity. And think about what God has done in the scope of it in that. And when we internalize that as part of our identity, which we've been talking about, amongst the people with whom we belong and who we belong to, this takes on a different characteristic that pulls us closer to zeal and opportunity. For the grace of God that brings salvation has appeared to all men. And on top of just appearing to all men, there's many of us today who are Christians where the grace of God that brings salvation has changed our lives. We are Christians because of that, and because of our obedience and response to it, we are an entirely different person, creature, a person with different purposes and goals than we were when we were caught up in the ways of the world. And sometimes we're in the process of letting some of that stuff in the world go and grabbing harder and closer to God. But who you are because of Jesus Christ is well beyond just capability. How can that not push us for zeal to do good works? To be passionate about my own salvation, but also the salvation of people around me. And also looking out that this is my church family, the needs that they have, the struggles they're going through, the difficulties and challenges that happen. Man, how can I not care about those things? How can we all not care for each other in that regard? And also the victories that occur, the things we're celebrating, how could we not be invested in that deeply and emotionally? It matters. It matters. It's not just a mechanical thing, it's reality that God calls us to do. Teaching us, denying ungodliness and worldly lusts, shut those aside. Those are no part of our lives. We should live soberly, righteously, and godly in the present age. Those are not concepts that existed for old-timey people long centuries ago. That these are archaic ideas. These are things that define who we are today. To be soberly living and righteously living and godly living today makes all the difference in the world. So that's what it taught us. But we're looking forward to a blessed hope and the glorious appearing of our great God and Savior Jesus Christ. His language is so big in what he's saying. It's so big. Sometimes we allow life to become very small and we're like, man, I'm just trying to survive, just trying to pay some bills, just trying to eat some food. But your life is so much bigger in what God's given you. You are a Christian, a child of God, a person following after Jesus. When it says we're looking for that blessed hope and glorious appearing of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ, do you understand? Every day He's your great God and Savior. Every day He's given you a call to come out and live and lift Him up. And every day He's given you an existence far greater than you could ever have without Him. With every breath we have, with every intent that we have, we can't look at life, it's just another day. No, we are Christians. We are God's people. It is a glorious day. And even if there's troubles on the horizon, you face them with God. And if there's needs in our community, we go at them with God and one another. And we look for that day not out of fear, but out of comfort and excitement. And every day we get to live, it's God's day. Let us be God's people in the midst of that. Why? Because He gave Himself, that He might redeem us from every lawless deed and purify for Himself His own special people, zealous for good works. He's calling us to be zealous. It is not a mechanical checklist that we live. Not even our morality really works that way, does it? The rights and wrongs. When we're learning, sometimes we treat it, did I lie today? No. Good job. Did I murder today? No. Good job. There's some things that are pretty obvious in that. But what if is today, did I connect my life to God in the sense that I reflected on Him and I dove into scriptures looking for Him, and the things I did that formed my schedule, my time, my identity, the formation of my spiritual life is based solely in Him. Did I do that? It's not just a fancy way of looking at it. That's the reality of our existence, our life in God. And if I do that, am I elevating towards Him? And am I lifting people up around me? And they lifting me up when I need that as well? This is a different kind of existence than just checklists and mechanical reactions and responses. This is life in God for His purposes. Zealous for good works. Zealous for good works. I love that when we see it in the church. And I love it here a lot because sometimes you look at a thing and you're like, oh man, what a special moment. Someone did like a really, really good job. Here, sometimes we take it for granted. And I love this about our congregation because there's a lot of you so zealous for good works. So zealous for good works. And it's inspiring and lifting. And when you learn a new thing about somebody, you're like, man, there it is again. And it's very, very special. He tells us to spend our time in those, but understanding the difference between capability and needs and zeal and opportunity makes a big difference when it's grounded in the Word. Take, for example, this moment. It might seem like a good deed. Now, anytime we look at a picture, there's an opportunity to kind of frame a story of what's going on in the midst of that. And in this, we got the basic one. Well, it looks like someone's about to receive some groceries, some food. So the good works in that may be that a person's like, hey, I've got the capability to go buy groceries and I'm going to bring them to a lady to fulfill her needs for whatever it may be. General story. But what would this look like if it was zeal and opportunity in the midst of it? If it's capability and needs, perhaps you get the groceries, you take them in the bag, here you go, fine person, good day, brother Christian, good day, sister Christian, you walk away. Well, capability was to buy the groceries, fulfill the need, and you walk away. But doesn't that feel a little shortchanged there a little bit? Zeal and opportunity might mean, hey, I got you these groceries. And I got your list because I know the things that you can eat and can't eat. And I didn't want to force you to eat just the things I want, but I really wanted to consider what your needs were and where you were. And do you have them? If you got time, I'd like to sit. We can just sit and talk. Can I be a friend to you right now? Can I show you that I love you? Can I give you a little bit of my time? And maybe if they're really struggling, can I give a little bit of my ears to just listen? Just listen and be there and maybe hold your hand through it. And can I check on you tomorrow? And before I go, can we have a prayer? That's two different things that's unfolding there. One is engaging a real person. The other is engaging in action. We're Christians. Our zeal and our opportunity has got to be well above just capability and need. We're engaging God's people on behalf of God. Now, that doesn't mean we get to lift ourselves up. Oh, how great am I? It's taking on that privilege to love people and be there for them as much like Jesus as we possibly can. And so we don't ever get to look down on anyone and we don't ever get to lift our own selves up. We just try to do a little better than we did the day before to show God in the world. That's the difference. It's an immense difference. And there's a lot of ways that you could go through this and capabilities. Our opening person was a person who had an incredible talent, and maybe that's what you got. And maybe with your incredible talent and your passion for it, you can share that with people. and lead them to God, or at least be there for them, either the church or the community. I got a buddy that's trying to do that. I've spoken to a couple of you. He's got a passion for golf, and he's trying to build up a middle school golf team. It's in a place where they have some difficulties. And he's like, man, they don't even have clubs. I was like, let's see what we got. And so I've asked some of you, and I'll ask all of you now, if you've got, I said, what do you need? He's like, man, if it's a club, they could use it. I was like, one club? He's like, anything. He's just trying to build up his community and do a good job for them and help lead them to the Lord, and also just teach them a skill and give them something to do. And some of you have responded, and I really appreciate that. Some of you might be hearing this for the first time, and you're like, you know what? I've got a random sand wedge in my garage, and I was chasing mice with it, but if a kid can use it, I'll clean it up first, and then here you go. Very generous of you. There's ways you can dive in those regards. I'll tell you just real quick, my plant from a couple weeks ago, it's still sad, but I'm trying. But the point of this is you all in the midst of this. Put it up as just a silly thing to make a point. And now it's a less silly thing to make a point. People engage in different ways, and a lot of you did have comments about the plan afterwards, and I listen, okay? But the point is access to this. This isn't complicated at all, but some people put a little extra into it. It makes all the difference in the world. Those are meaningful things. Someone brought me a meter to check the water in there because, I forget to water things. But you can see it's at 9, and some of you are probably like, that's too much water, you've killed it. Maybe, I don't know. Someone said, move it next to the window. Okay, let's do that. And then someone got a group of people to send a card to the plant. To the plant. I appreciate those things. They are funny, they're good, but they're human. And they're not just human in the sense like, oh, here's the thing. This isn't just the formality of going through a mechanic of doing a thing for people. To me, this was real people with real relationships showing a measure of care for one another. It's accessible. Any of you should be looking at this and was like, I could participate in something like that. You shouldn't. This is done. This is over. One of you suggested I either kill the plant or do something. I was like, whoa, dark, but you're right. So we're trying to make it live. But to make a card and wait a couple days later to give it was so funny. And it was just a really good moment. It was meaningful. It was a little extra, but that's zeal. That's just showing you that this doesn't have to be a hyper-complicated thing. It makes a difference, and that's important. Water meter, that's important. I was so grateful for that. Advice, that's great. It's important. It's accessible. Any of us can do that. You may have a skill for painting, and you can participate in Faith Builders and teach someone how to paint. What a wonderful thing to be able to do. Wonderful thing to be able to do. And to teach them to do it next level well. That's fantastic. You may have time available to you. You may have a good friend network that exists, and someone may have a need where they say, I don't have anyone around me. Can you connect me to somebody, please? You might be able to serve in that regard. It's not complicated, but it's meaningful. You may have a special ability in that. It's meaningful. And someone's definitely going to have a need, and you can meet them in the need. It's what we have to do, but make it an opportunity and do it with great zeal. Even just spending time reading, maybe reading scriptures together is such a powerful thing. And, it may seem very unusual in some of these, and some we're diving into a little bit more creative than the old stereotypes of way to serve. But that's where you get to the meat of it and the human interaction on a very honest level, where you are able to laugh together and love each other, and you are able to mourn together and rejoice together. This makes all the difference in the world. But sometimes people say, well, listen, my skill, I don't see how it fits in the church. And I've had this one happen before. Someone's like, my passion's in hunting. I don't know if I have a place in the church for that. I'm telling you, it just takes a little bit of creativity, a little bit of thought. It absolutely has a place. It absolutely has a place. We'll start with this. I ate at a fast food restaurant the other day that I don't usually go to. It cost $18.77. You're like, what'd you get, like 15 Big Macs? No. I got a sandwich, some cheese sticks. Granted, I didn't have to have the cheese sticks. Don't judge me. And the little chicken McNugget things, but they don't call them that at this restaurant. I'm not going to name the restaurant. $18? That's crazy. That's why I keep lunch meat in our refrigerator and eat here. If that's $18, what are people going through? What are people going through in life? Now, you know, I grew up in the country where hunting was a very normal thing, and that put food on the table for a lot of people. It may be that there's people like, hey man, can you teach me a thing? And someone is then able to say, yeah, I can teach you how to hunt. I can give you that time. I'm so passionate about it, I can teach you how to do it safely. I can teach you how to do it responsibly, respectfully for whatever you're hunting, and how you can help put food on the table. And you're like, man, that's unusual. We don't talk about that in church. It is unusual, but it's meaningful, and it's helpful, and it's the kind of thinking that goes beyond just capability and need to zeal and opportunity, because you're saying, I have a place to belong. I have an identity in the Lord, and the abilities that I have can serve people. There's a place in the church for every single person when we're a part of God's story. And even if it isn't the typical things, all the more interested. This isn't a place where we're going to say, your talents aren't available here. They're not our typical norm. No, let's find a place. Let's make it as meaningful as possible. That story with Dorcas is not just a little story, it's a pretty big deal. Maybe we need to talk about it quite a bit more, but most importantly, we definitely need to live it more. Whether you might be a Peter in that story, a Dorcas in the story, the two messengers in the story, or even the widow showing their intense gratitude, everyone had a place in the story. You do as well. And we need to make the endeavor, we need to make the effort to live it every single day with intense gratitude. That's our purpose in the Lord. That's our purpose in the Lord. We have an amazing congregation, and I'm grateful for every single one of you. But we've got room to grow. We've got room to develop. And we need to set ourselves to do that absolutely every single day. Grateful for our congregation. Love every one of you. And next year, when we come back to a similar topic, I hope we can say, I love each other even more. Man, we did more than we did the previous year. What a fantastic thing to be God's people, to serve His purposes and to glorify Him. And in the midst of that, may we pray that the effect of that isn't to lift our own selves up, but that other people will see that and believe. And other people will become Christians and come to know the blessing that's found in Jesus Christ. That is our purpose. That is our purpose. Today we'll close out with an invitation. I hope you think about your purpose. I hope today you walk away and you say, okay, how do I engage in that? How do I really sit down and map out a plan where I'm not going to be just doing capability and need, but zeal and opportunity? How do I connect with people? I hope you accept that challenge. But right now you may be sitting there going, I don't feel connected to God at all. And maybe I once did. Maybe I really did have that zeal and opportunity and I just let it slip away. Any number of reasons. Sin got into my life. Apathy got into my life. Maybe I got so bitter at the world that I just pushed God away and forgot His love and care and what that was like to get and to give, and it pushed me away from the church. There's an answer for that. It is found in Jesus. And the answer for that is something that you could have right now, which is why we offer the invitation to take advantage of now. And that if you do have a need in that regard, deal with it now. It may be that you've never been a Christian, but you know you need to be. And right now, I hope that's something that's turning in your heart, in your mind, and saying, I know I need to do something. I really need to take advantage of now and do something. And if literally now is not the time, maybe that's a conversation in either instance we have after services. But don't put it off. Take advantage of the time you have now. Live with God's purpose. Be in His story. The answer is found in Jesus and in His Word. You have a whole church full of people who loves you, who cares for you, and will be there for you. You belong. You belong with Jesus, and you need to live for His purposes. If there's a way we can serve you today, let us know as we stand and as we sing.